Hello, everyone. I am Storyteller. Thank you for visiting this peaceful place. I know you are looking for something soothing to help you fall asleep, and I am here to accompany you. If you enjoy, please give me a like and subscribe, and let me know where you are from. Thank you. Black Book. What is the value of a human life? Henry often wondered this himself. Sometimes it was all he thought about. A person is born, goes to school, gets into a career, and maybe even settles down and has a family. So many factors go into someone's life that it is hard to quantify each variable. Yet, Henry constantly tried to answer the question, and that's why you need to sort the shelves the way the company trained you. Do you understand, Henry? Henry blinked as his manager's words brought him back to reality. He turned to face the red-faced man. Sure thing, I'll get right on it. Apparently unsatisfied with his response, the sniff-necked manager left the aisle with a huff. He didn't know what the manager was upset about this time, but that was his usual response when his boss was angry. Henry felt relieved when he was left alone. The store initially hired him as a cashier. He tried to do his best, but his people skills were subpar. His boss didn't take long to give Henry a new position. Now, he was in charge of stocking and sorting the shelves. It was a peaceful job, except when customers asked him where certain products were. If he had to listen to another customer asking him where the sour cream was again, Henry shook his head at the thought. That was one of the things about people that bugged him. They never even seemed to attempt to look for stuff themselves. It seemed they thought their time was more valuable than his own. During his first few days of employment, the other staff would ask him many questions. Hey, how's it going? Did you catch the game last night? Why do you just stare off into space sometimes? Henry would always answer their questions the same way. I can't talk right now. They seemed to catch on that he didn't want to speak to them. His mind had more important subjects to think about. He only took this job because Henry thought he could think about life from a different perspective. His real work had been stalling for some time now. Henry just felt like he needed some inspiration to propel him forward. That was what he hoped to achieve working at a grocery store. So far, all he had achieved was to get a piercing headache anytime he spoke to anyone. As he stocked the shelves, trying to remember how they had trained him, he yearned for something society said was wrong. He checked his wristwatch and saw it was 4:45 p.m., almost halfway done. Soon, Henry could pursue his real passion. Time went by in a blur for Henry. It was 5, then 6, then 7. And before he knew it, it was almost time for him to leave. He looked at the shelves and saw they were all in perfect order. All that would be left for him to do now was clock out and walk out the front door. Most people would then get into their cars and drive home to their families. Henry had no family, at least none that were still alive. That thought used to pain him when he was a kid. But thinking about it now, he felt nothing. He had gotten used to living alone. Besides, since he was alone, no one could disturb his work. Henry had been watching one of his co-workers for the past few weeks, a bright and full of life young female who would be attending a well-known college in the spring. If overheard gossip was to be believed, she had a promising future. She was, however, known to be promiscuous. Everyone at work knew about it, and every time her boyfriend would come to pick her up, Henry could feel the tension in the air. Some guys she had been intimate with even worked at the grocery store. Many of their co-workers would show disgust with the woman, but Henry didn't have an opinion. He was more curious about it than anything. A woman who seemingly has a perfect life does something consistently to jeopardize everything. It fascinates him. That was why tonight he was not going to be going straight home. Henry already had everything planned in his mind. He just needed to wait. And patience was one of his strong suits, if nothing else. Henry walked to the back of the building and observed the woman, Ashley. She was going about her usual end-of-shift routine, seemingly without care. Once Henry had clocked out, he pretended to be doing some paperwork. Essentially, he was just stalling for time until Ashley was finished talking to the other employees. As the minutes passed, Henry wondered what she could be talking about for so long. That was another thing that Henry had trouble understanding. Small talk. What was the point of talking about subjects both sides knew the answers to, but pretended they didn't? It utterly baffled him. This was why his work was so necessary. Soon, I will have another piece to the puzzle. I know I am so close to understanding, so close to knowing what makes a person a person. I just need more experiments, more time. Finally, he saw a woman with 2 blonde pigtails and wearing her uniform with modifications, revealing more of her body than was appropriate. Looking at her, even Henry could see why all the guys went for her. She was fit, perky, and seemed to be, on the outside, a ray of positive energy. However, he wasn't interested in any of that, because his interest in her came from a different place. Okay, see you guys later. Ashley said this, and waved goodbye to everyone she had been talking to. They waved at her and said an unsynchronized goodbye. After moments, Henry got up and put away the papers he had been pretending to read. He saw that no one was watching and left out the back door. His car was parked in the parking lot, and he got inside. Ashley was still in clear view as she walked down the sidewalk. With a turn of his key, his car came to life. Henry knew the exact path she would take to get home. The key to any good plan is careful calculations, after all. He went the opposite way, instead of driving behind her and potentially being seen by a coworker. From his planning, he knew there was a spot where he could park his car and wait for her to walk by. Then, he would say he was having car trouble and ask to use her phone. As he drove to the spot, his lips moved upward into a smile. During his actual work was the only time he felt any real emotions. For the time being, he couldn't help the smile on his face, nor did he want to. However, once it was time to begin, he would be stoic and show nothing. The spot was empty, as Henry knew it would be. He carefully drove the car in and shut off the engine. Now, there was some time before she would arrive. It was perfect, allowing him to start the entry in his black book. Henry opened his glove box and felt around for it. His fingers touched a firm edge and the black book's distinctive leather texture. The answers to Henry's questions were within its pages, and it was his life's work. He felt like she could be the one to fit all the pieces together. Sighing as he opened the book, he knew he had thought those exact thoughts before. No, she is different. I am confident she is the one. My work is almost complete. Then I can rest. Yes, relax and enjoy life. Enjoy? What does that mean? Have I ever enjoyed anything? Yes, my work brings me joy. Henry violently shook his head in an attempt to clear his thoughts. He checked his wristwatch and knew Ashley should be passing by any minute now. The car door creaked as Henry opened it, and the ground beneath his feet made a crunching noise as he exited the car. His senses were always heightened as when he was working. Then he heard the distinctive sound of approaching footsteps. I know, right? You won't believe what she said to me after that. Her voice echoed through the night sky, and the words' high-pitched tone hurt Henry's head. He popped the hood of the car and grabbed his work bag. Pulling a rag out of it and dousing it in a potent knockout agent, he felt calm. Henry hid the rag in his pocket and bent over the engine, pretending to examine it. When Ashley saw Henry, she jumped at first. Then she saw who it was and seemed only to get more startled. Henry pretended not to notice her for a moment. Using his best acting skills, he looked up at her and put a surprised look on his face. Oh, hey, Ashley. Yeah, my car just sort of crapped out. I've been trying to see what's wrong with it, but I might be out of my league here. He could see her hesitate, and Henry thought she might just turn and run. Maybe her survival instincts were telling her to flee for her life. Ultimately, she seemed to take a breath and compose herself. Did you need any help? You would help me? A strange man in a dark alley? She chuckled at that, and that confused Henry. He genuinely asked her that question, and she thought he was joking. Was it because they worked together, leading her to believe she knew him somehow? In the end, Henry didn't know. Do you need help or not? I got to meet up with someone soon. Of course, that would be great. Thank you. Can you just hold a light over here so I can see the engine better? Sure. She opened her phone and turned on its flashlight. Ashley approached the car's hood and held the light high to expose the engine. Let me just grab a wrench. 1 second. Henry went around to the back of the car and pulled the rag out of his pocket. That was when it happened, and it didn't surprise Henry. His vision started to turn red, and his head began to tremble. His ears began to ring, and he had to hold on to the car as dizziness suddenly overtook him. The symptoms only got worse and worse until he blacked out. When he came to, he was sitting in the front seat of his car with his black book in hand. He sifted through the book, remembering where he got it. It was at a yard sale, of all places, where he first saw the black book. The book seemed to call to him with its ornately designed cover. Immediately, he went over and picked it up. He remembered thinking that this book was what he had been missing his whole life. Henry gave the owner whatever insignificant amount of money they had wanted and left. That was the day his life had truly begun. Now, he had a passion for his work, his genuine work. Focusing on the present moment, he opened the book and read its most recent entry. Participant 264. Name: Ashley. Perky, attractive, promiscuous, naive, trusting, deceitful, social. Performed fingernail removal on both hands. She screamed in agony for several minutes, surprisingly. Then, she became silent. After a few minutes of silence, I proceeded with a finger removal. This elicited intense emotions from the participant, which went on for several minutes. After I removed all the fingers and the screaming and pleading stopped, more work was required. Starting from the wrist, I cut the skin and peeled it back all the way to the elbow. I took great care to ensure the patient didn't black out from blood loss. The results of the experiments had to be seen on the patient's face. This continued until there was no more skin on both her arms. At this point, the participant was slipping in and out of consciousness, and I knew it was time to end the experiment. I used an axe I bought from a camping store, and placing her head against the floor, decapitated her in 2 swings. It would have been 1 swing, but I lost my footing. It was very unprofessional, and I will take care to prevent this in the future. In conclusion, Ashley was an interesting subject, but not the one She would not be the one to answer my questions. More experiments to follow. Henry sighed after he finished reading. He closed the book and put it back in his glove box. Looks like the book didn't find what it was looking for. When Henry tried to remember his life before the black book, he couldn't. If he tried to recall the memories, a great pain would follow. That doesn't matter to me anymore. I am not that person anymore. Move on. Wait a second. Maybe what I need is a fresh start. Just me and my book together. Yes, a new name and a new life. This town is getting old, and inspiration is lacking. Yes, yes, yes. He shook his head until the thoughts stopped, then rubbed his eyes. Henry checked his wristwatch and saw it was almost 6 a.m. They would soon be looking for participant 264, and the idea made Henry chuckle. There was no way they would ever find her. He had made sure of that. That didn't matter to him, though. He needed to look toward the future, for he was one step closer to knowing the value of a person's life. Stargazier. With rumblings of war rolling along the coastline, the knock startled Cecil. His grip tightened on the pewter plates as a sense of foreboding took hold. Opening the door revealed a handsome stranger with refined features, as if carved from marble. He had jet black hair and eyes that glinted like cold steel. "Good evening and Happy Christmas," said the stranger in a rich baritone. "My apologies for the intrusion, but it seems my carriage has lost a wheel just up the road. Might I trouble you for some shelter from the cold while my man fetches assistance?" Cecil hesitated. He had been expecting his brother-in-law. He was struck dumb. Before he could collect his wits, his wife appeared behind him. "Marry a sec?" she asked. Seeing the stranger standing in the door, she apologized. "Sorry, I thought you were me brother. His carriage threw a wheel," Cecil said. "Of course. Please come in," Sharon said, nudging her husband aside and opening the door wider. The stranger rubbed down his arms as if to shift rain from his finely tailored long coat. Though wary, Cecil relented under his wife's insistence. As the stranger stepped inside, removing his leather gloves, Cecil couldn't shake the feeling of darkness lurking beneath the polished, genteel surface. He led the man toward the sitting room as Sharon fetched some tea, hoping his instinct was wrong. The man shrugged off his jacket, folded it neatly, and put his Homburg on top. "I'm Cecil, by the way," he added politely. "And you are?" "Moloch. Abraham Moloch," said the stranger with a thin smile as he took a seat by the fire. "A pleasure to make your acquaintance." "What brings you to this part of the coast?" Cecil asked. Sharon returned with a tea tray, casting a reproachful look at Cecil for not taking the stranger's bag or hanging his hat. "Please make yourself comfortable, Mr. Moloch," she said warmly, handing him a cup. Just then, their 2 children peeked into the room, eyes widening at the unfamiliar guest. They had heard rumors of German soldiers landing along the coast and were wary. "The tall one is Felix. The runt is Jasper," Sharon said. She busied herself pouring tea, checking his sack coat. Mr. Moloch's face soured. "I seem to be out of cinder toffees. Bad luck? Perhaps next time." He then opened his bag and pulled out a few colorful Christmas crackers. The children's caution vanished at the sight. "For your little ones," Mr. Moloch said, with a genteel nod, handing the crackers to Sharon. She gave them to the delighted children. The stranger made a show of patting his pockets. "My apologies. I seem to have left my coin purse on my carriage." He turned to Cecil. "Please, take this as a token for your hospitality," he said, offering a large golden ring set with a glittering red gemstone. Cecil politely declined. "That won't be necessary, really. We're happy to help," Mr. Moloch insisted. But Cecil refused once more. Finally, Mr. Moloch returned the ring to his pocket, a flicker of irritation passing over his features before the charming smile reappeared. In her lilting accent, Sharon offered to share their dinner. "There's plenty of stargazy pie and stewed greens to go around. 'Tis no trouble," Mr. Moloch accepted graciously. "You are too kind. I apologize for the inconvenience. I'm on my way to London to view a portrait. Please let me contribute. It's not a bother." Moloch's voice rumbled like distant artillery. Cecil imagined the windows rattling. "Oh, nonsense. Travelers are welcome. It wouldn't be Christian of us to turf you out," Sharon said, then turned sharply to the children. "And don't you dare be popping them crackers till supper," she instructed Cecil to fetch an extra place setting and yelled to the kitchen for one of the children to bring the stool, so Mr. Moloch had a place to sit. Leaving to finish the cooking preparations, she tossed a meaningful glance at her husband. With Sharon gone, Mr. Moloch again offered Cecil the ring. "Please, I must insist. Consider it thanks for your hospitality." This time, with no one else present, Cecil accepted it, sliding the ring onto his finger. The red gem glinted in the firelight. Mr. Moloch smiled, leaning back with a smirk. Cecil studied the ring on his hand. It looked expensive. How would he explain this extravagant gift to Sharon? She had refused it just minutes ago. Perhaps he could trade it in the village without her ever knowing. He quickly took it off and put it in his pocket. The family sat down to dinner, with the older boy pushing the stool into Jasper's spot. The smell of fresh bread and fish followed Sharon. Jasper's knees poked up too high, so he stretched his legs out to the sides. "Don't be rockin', Jasp. We've got company." Sharon put her hand on Japer's leg to hold him still. Jasper moved the wiggles up to his shoulders in defiance. "We've got plenty of food. I'm afraid we've mashed together our holidays on account of me brother comin' home from the war. He should be along any time now." Cecil whistled. "Don't mind my wife. She's Cornish and a wee bit potty," Sharon playfully smacked Cecil's shoulder. You familiar with the story of Tom Bawcock? It's Marius's favorite holiday, so we didn't want him to miss out. Would you like me to recount the tale? Cecil feigned disinterest, having heard it many times before. It's just a fish tale. I'd love to hear it. Mr. Moloch's eyes opened wide. Dinner and a show? You are too kind, clearing her throat. Sharon launched into song. A merry place, you may believe, was Mousehole upon Tom Bawcock's eve. To be there, then, who wouldn't wish to sup o' 7 sorts of fish? Cecil interjected. Could you at least sing in plain English, dear? I was, Sharon replied indignantly, then laughed at her flustered husband. The children joined in teasing Cecil as she continued. When Murgy Broth had cleared the path, comed lances for a fry. And then us had a bit o' ska, and starry gazy pie. Mr. Moloch applauded enthusiastically, rising to his feet. Marvelous. You have a true gift, my dear. Thank you for sharing such a delightful folk tale. Sharon beamed, giving a slight curtsy before urging everyone to tuck into the feast before them. The children reached for the Christmas crackers. Mr. Moloch raised a hand. Please, allow me to share a tradition from my home. Are you familiar with Snapdragon? Cecil perked up, recalling playing it as a boy, burning his mouth in the process. He nodded with a grin. From his bag, Mr. Moloch produced a tin of dried fruits and almonds and a bottle of brandy. Using the lid of the tin as a dish, he tapped out a few pieces of fruit and doused them with the brandy. He lit the fruit with a match. They ignited in blue fire. Plucking a piece of dried apple up, he popped it into his mouth, then blew out a small blue flame. The children watched, enthralled. When Felix reached out, Mr. Moloch pulled the tin away. There is a rule to this game, a way to show what you are most thankful for. He turned to Cecil meaningfully. In this dance, with fear and shadow, reveal the ember burning deepest within. Speak not of fleeting joy, but lay bare the pulsating rhythm that makes you feel alive. For in the flicker of this flame, you offer the essence binding you to existence, the marrow of your being. Choose wisely, for what you express in this dance may echo beyond the crackling fire. Cecil tensed, unsettled by the speech. He started to object, but Sharon and the children insisted on playing. Reluctantly, Cecil nodded, hoping it was merely an odd tradition and nothing more. Jasper went first, popping a flaming fig into his mouth and blowing out a wisp of blue flame. My fossil collection, he declared proudly. Felix blew a slightly larger plume. My brother, Jasper! Jasper took a moment to decide if that was an insult, and chose to accept it as so, with a broad, crooked smile. Sharon selected a piece of dried plum, popped it in her mouth, and blew a modest burst of blue. My singing voice, of course. She put her hand to her mouth. Blooming hot. Cecil blew a flame and said, maintaining our thankful village, with all returned so far from the war. Mr. Moloch inhaled deeply, then exhaled an enormous, writhing blue jet. Nothing, he uttered in his deep bass. They pulled their Christmas crackers. With a festive popping, a scattering of paper crowns and trinkets spread across the table. But then, Cecil noticed Jasper was gone. On the empty place where Jasper had sat was a letter stating Mariasek had died in the trenches in Le Cateau. Somberly, they had set the extra place for the missing brother. The first casualty of war come to their village. Cecil looked around, confused. Hadn't someone been sitting across from him just a moment ago? He felt bad for his wife. She'd been so upset. It was nice, however, to have a house guest. He also wondered why Felix was using the kitchen stool and not the chair set for his brother-in-law's spirit. But glancing at Mr. Moloch's smiling face, the questions slipped from Cecil's mind. Sharon offered to sing Tom Bawcock's tale in her gravelly voice. Mr. Moloch was eager to hear it. She began, "A merry plaise you may believe was mousel upon Tom Bawcock's eve." Cecil quickly stopped her, feeling something was amiss. Her voice wasn't her best trait. It's a Cornish tradition about a fisherman during a time of famine who bravely set out in a storm to feed the town where Sharon came up. Mr. Moloch proposed a round of snapdragon, calling it a beloved pagan tradition where you express gratitude. Wary but enticed, Cecil agreed to play, as did an enthusiastic Felix and Sharon. Mr. Moloch turned to Cecil. "As the flames dance, whisper the heartbeat of your existence. Share not what you cherish, but the core defining your breath. What in your soul would you sacrifice to the hungry fire?" Felix blew a blue jet. "My boxing gloves." Sharon smiled proudly at her son's first true passion. She blew her flame. "My son Felix." Felix beamed. Cecil contemplated a moment before blowing his fiery breath. The proud, strong Royal Navy keeping invaders at bay. As the crackers popped, Sharon let out a wail. Felix was gone. Sobbing, she explained her boy was killed in the German shelling of the coast. He was so fond of Unton fossils after Boxen in Whitby. My apologies for her. It's been a trying time, Cecil said. She'd lost her voice from ceaseless weeping over the past fortnight. Mr. Moloch looked pained. My sincerest regrets at your loss. They sat in silence for a few moments, so Sharon could collect herself. Perhaps a round of snapdragon to lift spirits, Mr. Moloch suggested. My family tradition is to share what we are most thankful for. He turned to Cecil. You know the rules. Speak the fire within, the pulse of your sacrifice. What do you cherish most? Sharon blew a wisp of blue. My lovely home, Cecil contemplated. before breathing his flame. "My beautiful wife," Mr. Moloch rumbled. Nothing, his jet dwarfing theirs. The crackers popped like artillery fire as Cecil transitioned to sitting with Mr. Moloch in a seaside shack. Cecil drank heavily from the offered brandy, lamenting his wife, his children, his home, his brother. He stared at the letter, telling of his brother-in-law's death. Cecil's memories slipped away like vapor. He regretted not living the life he wanted, blaming the demon drink that stole his wife, kids, and chance to take his place in battle. Mr. Moloch offered dried fruit and a game of Snapdragon to lift his spirits. "Sacrifice the spark, keeping your flame alive, fueling your dance in shadows," he instructed. Cecil blew a wisp of blue. "My health?" Mr. Moloch rumbled. "Nothing." Then he offered a Christmas cracker. The pop left a hint of black powder in the air. In a bedroom, Mr. Moloch sat beside Cecil. They played again, Cecil sacrificing his only prized possession, the ring sitting heavy in his pocket. Mr. Moloch blew out a large flame and crunched into his almond, then said, "Nothing." Cecil stood to pull the cracker. Mr. Moloch assisted Cecil's palsied hand. A pop and a wisp of smoke. Cecil reached for the flaming fruit, blew out a flame. "My home." They pulled the cracker together. Mr. Moloch offered his coat to Cecil, a destitute man on the roadside. He pulled a table and chairs from the back of his broken coach, then invited Cecil to share some stargazy pie while his carriage was repaired. Cecil recognized the pie and table. Memories of his wife and children flooded back. He despaired at their loss. The rancid pie at the end of Cecil's ordeal seemed a mockery, stale remnants of a life freely sacrificed to an insatiable demon. Despite this, the food was more than welcome. Each bite revealed years of life, each crumb a precious scene. He ate at his memories as a starved man. "Please return all as it was. I refuse to play Snapdragon any longer," he pleaded. Mr. Moloch just smiled. "One final cracker." He shook the cracker enticingly. Cecil cried, "My life. I'd trade my life for theirs." "Finally," Mr. Moloch uttered, holding out the cracker. This time, Cecil got the bigger half. "Dreadful luck, Cecil." He set the paper crown atop Cecil's head. Strands of Cecil's hair drifted onto Mr. Moloch's sleeve. Cecil sat numbly as Mr. Moloch brushed off the fallen hair, gingerly placing one in his front vest pocket. "You traded your life, family, and youth for a ring. Then, even the ring you returned. When will humans learn to give selflessly?" "But what of my children's souls?" Cecil asked, his voice frail, but insistent. "Their bodies, I can find a use. Their souls are their own," replied Moloch, tapping his finger to his lips. "You know, I never ask for children, yet I'm often offered them. Perhaps you know why humans so eagerly trade their future. Cecil had a coughing fit. I am not heartless, spiritually, added Moloch. I can offer you one last challenge, a gift if you answer a riddle. But you would not know the gift beforehand. Having nothing left, Cecil accepted the challenge. This one was from a Canaanite whom I knew several lifetimes ago. In every heartbeat and every sigh, I'm the reason you laugh and the tears you cry. From the first cry of newborn breath to the quiet stillness at death's edge. What am I? Moloch adjusted his hat and waved to his coach. I am expected in London to collect a portrait of a young man. It seems its owner has withered away in a locked room. The damn fool. He smiled. Souls aren't typically my business, but that fellow. Please let me think in silence. Moloch shrugged. Life, Cecil said, sure of his answer. Please give me my family, my wife, Jasper. I beg you, I want peace. Please, I have given up everything. Correct, Moloch said. He handed Cecil a draft. If you drink it, none of this would matter. He waved his hands theatrically. Far out at sea, a ship was on fire. The scent of gunpowder and death rolled over the seaside like a fog. Cecil was caught by hope's web. He imagined he'd wake with his family by his side. So he drank without hesitation. The blue liquid smelled of blueberries and spirits. The flavor was a simple, mildly floral sweetness, but empty, like drinking a hole. He was alone, holding an empty bottle. He began a long, quiet walk down a dark road. A carriage passed within a beautiful voice rang out. A merry plays you may believe was mousel pon Tom Bawcock's eve. To be there, then oo wooden wesh, to sup o sibm sorts o fesh. When Morgie broth had cleared the path, comed lances for a fry, and then us had a bet o and starry gazi pie. Nex cummed for mods, brathusti jods, as mod are oozles, dry, and ling and hock, enough to make a raunen shark to sigh. A H wed clunk as elth were drunk, and bumpers bremen why. And when up come Tom Bawcock's, nam we praised unto the sky. Two boys waved from the carriage window at the old man wearing a paper crown. Cecil smiled at them as they passed. On 25th December, an unofficial truce was declared along the Western Front. Peace for a day. Perhaps Moloch was not entirely heartless. Cecil did ask for peace. 28 sleighs. Later, above the laughter and Christmas music, the bang against the door came. Thump, thump, thumped. Paul Reyes sighed. He patted his wife's hand and pushed his chair away from the table. Don't worry, love. I've got this one. Rosemary frowned at him. But everybody's here. Who could it be? He stopped. Rose had framed the doorbell with tinsel You couldn't miss it. It would take a brain-dead person to knock instead of ringing. He shrugged. Carolers, or something. I'll give 'em a quid and tell 'em to bugger off. A round of laughter rippled around the table. The playlist swapped over to Wham's Last Christmas. Outside in the front hall, the door shuddered again. Thump, thump, thump. It banged hard enough to make the door vibrate in its frame. Annoyance flickered in his mind. The nerve of some of these charity-begging types. He wasn't one to sniff at donations, but give a man ample time to get up. And don't knock his door down like you're the wolf versus the 3 little pigs. He hurried along in his slippers. I'm coming! Hold your horses! But still, the banging continued. Thump, thump, thump. The little panes of glass at the top of the door vibrated and threatened to shatter. The figure of a man swayed beyond, blurry and dark. Paul gritted his teeth. He'd have some stern words for whoever it was. It didn't matter what good cause they were raising money for. This behavior was downright rude. He slid the chain off and yanked the door open. Oh, for goodness sake, what's your prob? The man behind the door barged through, snarling and screeching. He wore a parka coat with its fur-ringed hood raised. It framed his mess of a face. He had blood smeared all across his skin, and his nose was missing. A window shattered somewhere in the back of the house, and a woman shrieked. Paul's stomach dropped, and he screamed. He grappled with the invader and grabbed a hold of his shoulders. What? He grunted. Let go of me. The man clawed at Paul's shirt. He leaned forward and snapped his teeth. His breath was rotten, and he had bits of ragged meat caught between his teeth. He snarled like a wildcat, and his eyes were white, except for tiny pinpricks of blackness in the center. He flinched backwards from the bites. It was almost as if the maniac wanted to bite his nose off, too, as revenge for losing his own. Whatever was wrong with him, drugs, he guessed. He was dangerous, and Paul had to stop him. Paul grabbed the nearest thing from the shelf on the wall, an animatronic snowman. He smacked the madman across the face with it. Jingle Bell Rock played from the crappy speakers, and the snowman started to boogie. Paul hit the man with it again and again. Get out! Get out! The man recoiled from each blow of the rubber decoration. He snarled and shrieked, backing away through the front door as Paul struck him. At some point, something mechanical cracked inside the snowman. The song came out slurred and slow. Jack Frost danced slower. One arm snapped off, and his head dented inwards. Blood smeared across his white body. Adrenaline surged through Paul's veins, reminding him of how it felt to be a young man. He became aware of his battle cry as he fought the mauled lunatic out of his home. With the noseless man wobbling on the threshold, Paul landed a kick into the guy's gut. "And stay out!" he roared. The man went sprawling backwards over the Reyes' front steps. He clattered into a heap at the foot of their driveway. At the top of the driveway staggered a group of people. 2 men and 4 women. Each had various ghastly wounds, like the noseless assailant. A cheek torn open here, an eye gouged out there. Intestines spilt out of one woman's belly and trailed behind her like a bridal train. Across his small patch of lawn in front of the lounge windows, a woman with one arm shambled towards him. Paul's nerves turned to liquid and his legs to jelly. He whimpered and felt his bladder threaten to release. He scrambled for the door, missed, found the handle, and slammed it shut. With shaking hands, he slid the chain back across, his fingers slaked with gore. "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus," he whispered to himself. Immediately, the door began to bang again, and so did the windows looking into the lounge. And the screams from the back of the house continued, high-pitched and terrified. Goose flesh rippled up all over Paul's body. These nutcases had surrounded the house. He had no idea what they wanted, but he guessed it wasn't a cup of cocoa. He pushed off from the vibrating door and strode towards the sound of the commotion. He brandished his decoration/weapon. Rose, in the kitchen, some of the attackers had smashed their way through the windows. The glass sliced their forearms to ribbons, but they didn't care. They were trying to pull Rose out by her hair. She shrieked and kicked and batted at the hands to no avail. Several of their guests stood by and watched, their faces drawn in a rictus of shock. They still held their alcoholic beverages. Sean from next door had gone white, and his beer was tipping and spilling on the kitchen tiles. Paul froze. Rose had always argued about getting double glazing, but he'd deferred. He now wished he'd listened to his wife. How long until the front windows, looking out onto the lawn, shattered under the strain? He slapped himself across the face and raced into the fray, swinging Frosty for all his worth. He smacked at the hands that snaked through the glass over and over and over again. "Get off my wife, you damn hooligans." That broke the paralysis spell over the others. The kitchen became a flurry of activity as people dropped drinks and grabbed a hold of Rose. Gail Clark yanked on Rose's feet, pulling her back into the house. In his vest and tie combo, Sean lobbed his pint glass through the window with a violent yell. The claws clutching Rose weakened enough for her to break away. Rosemary collapsed to the floor, sobbing. She held her hands to the blotchy red patches of yanked-out hair. Paul's mind was a flurrying snowstorm of thought. He stood in the kitchen, chest heaving. He stared out at the people gathered in his back garden. "Zombies," he said, not quite believing himself. "They're goddamn zombies." The swaying figures closed in on the house. Bangs and clangs echoed from the front. The dim winter light faded as the bodies blocked out the windows. They moaned in a chorus of the dead, their bloodied hands slapping against the four walls. Someone asked, "What do we do, Paul?" I don't," a woman screeched. "They're coming down the fireplace." An ice shard speared through Paul's core, and the world seemed to slow. "Sweet baby Jesus," he mumbled. An enormous thud shook the foundations of the house. The survivors staggered to the walls for support. Paul shook his head clear. He tightened his grip on Frosty and ran for the lounge. He skidded to a halt as a cloud of coal dust settled across the room, coating the furniture and the tree. The hell? The smog cleared to reveal a massive man in a red and white suit. He kneeled, fists on either side, like the Terminator from that Schwarzenegger flick. A large brown sack slung over his shoulder. He had heavy-duty black boots, and a Santa hat clung to his head. Paul's insides shriveled. He'd fought off the one at the door because they'd been roughly the same size. But this one? No chance. He tried to speak, but found that all the spit had evaporated from his mouth. Only a tiny mouse-like squeak came from his vocal cords. The giant looked up. His eyes sparkled above two rosy cheeks. The orbs looked normal. No cataractic whiteness, narrowing to a black pinprick. A big, thick, white, bushy beard sprouted from his face. Paul dropped the damaged Frosty, which bounced to the laminate wooden floor. His head spun like he'd taken a right hook to the dome. "Santa?" Paul whimpered. Santa smiled, but the smile was fleeting. "Yes, Paul, it is me. Do not be afraid." He glanced at the window, which showed the growing horde pressing against it. "But you should be afraid of those naughty boys and girls." Paul's heart hammered high up in his chest, like a hummingbird trapped in his torso. His brain kept rifling through facts and thoughts as if to make sense of it all. His old thinker kept coming up short. It threw its cards in the air and searched through the rubble again. "What?" He licked his lips. "What do we do?" Santa grinned and stood up. He was 8 feet tall and towered over Paul and the others. If he were any taller, he wouldn't be able to stand upright in this house. He chuckled a deep, throaty laugh. "Ho, ho, ho." It rumbled through the earth like a bear's growl. Santa unslung his sack and upended it onto the living room floor. Machetes, blades, baseball bats, cricket bats, axes and chainsaws, swords and knives, flamethrowers and guns, even a grenade, and armor. It looked like police riot gear, except it had the symbol of a snowflake. I have brought you well-behaved children, some toys to play with. Paul regained some of his lost nerve at the sight of the armory. With this elf-like giant on their side, they could turn the tides of battle. He bent down and picked up a chainsaw. Groovy, Santa bowed. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a few 100,000 more homes to equip for the coming siege. Out beyond the front window, a reindeer with a red nose was fighting off zombies with its antlers. It was winning. Paul felt like someone had punched the wind out of him. His eyes darted from Santa to the fireplace. You mean you won't stay? Won't stay and fight? We won't last without you. I am afraid there are others who need me. Santa raised one gloved finger. Remember, Paul, jealousy and greed are very naughty. He gestured to the treasure hoard on the ground. I brought you these because you have all been good. Let us keep it that way. Will you at least tell us why this is happening? Santa narrowed his eyes. When there is no more room in ho-ho hell, the dead will walk the earth. And with that, he vanished back up the chimney in the blink of an eye. In the background, the glass front window started to crack. A lightning bolt fault line zigzagged. Paul revved the chainsaw and beckoned his friends and family. Let's do this. Everyone, arm yourselves. Rose, stay behind me. Put some armor on. Gail picked up a spear and donned a helmet. She pulled up alongside Paul and jabbed at the air between them and the fracturing window. A flurry of movement in the distance showed that Rudolph was still fending off the zombies. Gail screeched. Jesus is the only zombie we allow this time of year. Paul took the lead and strode forward, chainsaw in front like a jouster. Sean drew alongside with a shotgun. He pumped it, and 2 red shells bounced to the Reyes' rug. Sean had a steely look in his eyes that Paul had never seen before. He didn't even know the man could handle a gun. The only thing we should be eating is turkey. The window gave way, and the zombies flooded in. Paul raised the growling chainsaw and went to battle. Rest in peace on earth. Cabin fever. Then the storm broke and was replaced the next morning with a frozen 1880s blue sky. The kind when after the clouds clear, the world shuts down with a blinding but heartless sun. No wind and dead quiet. Jason and Bill huddled around the cabin's only wood burner. Above them, the pine timbers groaned and complained with the weight of the storm's snow, over 20 feet on the roof. But what dropped their stomach into a mine shaft was the sharp crack about every 10 minutes, a sound like a double barrel going off in the rafters. The cold clenched down on the roof beams. The cabin held in a merciless, ice-cold fist. It was not unknown for a collapsed cabin to be found in the spring, the dead still frozen under the rubble, a beast with a blood-froze beard. Bill mumbled out loud to himself, feeding logs to the wood burner. He'd almost lost Jason the night before. The storm outside had been ghost white and howling a blow. He had worried Jason would lose the rope he'd strung to the outhouse, 60 feet from the cabin. He knew from experience, men lose their way, only to be found in the spring thaw. So when Jason had slammed the pine door and come back in, shaking and terrified, saying he barely made it back, and talking about his lungs seared out from the cold, he had sighed in relief. But when he'd calmed down later, Jason said, "There's something out there, Bill. I could feel it looking at me. I swear I saw eyes in the dark, red eyes, and a growl." Provisions were low, so for supper, the only meal that day, Bill dished out steaming black beans, only a sourdough biscuit on the side. Bill, chicken. Bill, they called him, liked to talk when he was serving food, and fancied himself a philosopher, a cowboy philosopher, although his ranching days were well over. He was 50, which is old in the mountains, but a lot about Bill was still adventurous, with his red kerchief, leather chaps he wore like skin, and his Stetson, which he rarely took off. As he dished out the food, he declared, "The Shoshone have 100 words for snow, Jason. Snow that grows out of the ground. A hoary frost sparkling with tiny ice fingers reaching for the sun. Snow that forms a crust when the top melts some and then freezes back up, which might break your leg in a post hole. And snow that lives in the worst cold and wraps itself in the body of a wolf and steals your soul. Like now. Bill, it's 60 below, and I don't feel much like talking about the cold." "I understand, son," Bill said, and took Jason's empty tin plate away. Later that night, Bill sat by the burner. The flame reflected on his weathered face, high cheekbones, and full lips. A handsome man, his wife had said. He stroked the scar from the edge of his eye to the back of his chin. A scuffle with Texas rough Civil War vets in '72, calling him half-breed in the street. But I know this cold is different, he thought. It's tougher with Jason. The fire held his eyes on the yellow-blue flame for a long while, the wood humming and spitting, the smoke smelling of pine sap. "Did you swear you wouldn't take on caring about another?" he asked himself. "Did you?" "Yes. After the sickness, I did. And now you're caring about this Jason. And that's why you're scared? You're getting odd." Bill kept feeding the fire, but couldn't help thinking about death. For him, a white wolf in his dreams with a blooded snout, a red-eyed beast scratching to get in. The next morning, the Olson party beat on the door. Finding the cabin must have taken some luck. Dick Olson, his wife Martha, their daughter Susan, and their young boy, Joey. They filled the cabin once inside. Mr. Olson was near done. Living with his feet black from the frostbite, he could still hobble, but Bill had him put 1 foot in cold water. It began bleeding, and he wrapped it up. Jason asked Bill about the feet in the kitchen, and Bill talked low, so the party wouldn't hear. You can tell from his sagging eyes the West has whipped him, Jason. If you notice, his eyeballs are skittering like a mare beat too much. Once broke like that, too broke, a horse won't come back to anything worth working. Mr. Olson has the no blinks, and I've seen it in the mines. You best stay clear when you run up on a man like that. Next thing you know, you'll be staring too far away yourself. Their daughter, Susan, did not have the no blinks, Jason thought. Just with a sneak peek, he could see she was the most beautiful creature he'd ever put eyes on. Once she unwrapped from the weather, her long hair alone shone like some kind of goddess, he guessed. The blonde let loose, soft and shimmering. She made him think of a gazelle he saw once up in the high country. It stood with its white belly and golden hide, then ran off as light as air. The god's creature moved like grace itself, but Susan, just sitting there, was better. No, sir. You cannot chance more than a sneak peek when you run into a sight like that. He kept his eyes on the burner and was glad when the Olson party carved out a private area off to the side, blankets making a wall of sorts. Bill made some supper for all 6, including himself. The last of the salt ham, hardtack, and black beans. Everyone silent around the pine table. Bill didn't talk much around strangers at first. Some said likely due to him being a half-Bannock Indian. But once the diners settled in, the boy Joey couldn't get enough and threw questions at Bill like a scattergun. How long you been up here? Why do they call you Chicken Bill? And where'd you get that scar on your cheek? Bill gave short answers, but his eyes smiled, talking to the boy. He explained the Galena cabin was the way station for the Stanley to Ketchum route, an overnight midpoint on the 60-mile run. Jason was a postal officer and would ski the 60 miles on 8-foot board skis, the trail too narrow for a wagon and too steep for a horse. Jason listened in, but also knew Bill had lost both his wife and son to cholera and sparked up around children. The boy asked, "Why don't you wear a gun?" Bill said, "I'm done with guns, young man. Guns mostly don't ever work out like you expect." Joey's eyes grew into silver dollars. "Did you ever kill anybody?" The table went quiet, and Bill said, "Excuse me. Jason and I have to clean up." Come on, Jason." As he rose, his eyes were glistening, and Jason remembered Bill didn't like to talk about guns and killing. Bill and Jason were in the kitchen when Mr. Olson came limping in. He was dodging around like he had something to say, but couldn't. Finally, he said, "Joe's mother feels..." "Well, don't talk to our son," she says. Bill said, "Sure, no problem." He took a deep breath and let it out. "You'll always be an outsider, looked at as an outcast by your own people, a savage Indian by the other." Jason felt bad for Bill, but the truth was, he thought there was nothing he could do about it anyway. The next day, the Dawson brothers pounded on the door. After coming in, they spread out like it was natural to position themselves for a gunfight. The one in the middle was Cliff, the oldest brother. He scanned the room, his eyes not missing a thing, running over Jason and Bill like bacon, greasy fingers, assessing if they were a threat. He then stopped on Mrs. Olson. "You get lost out of Pocatello? Standing me up in Ketchum seem right to you?" Slumped down at the table like a man giving up, Mr. Olson stared at his foot wrapped in the bloody rag. He glanced at his wife, but she saddled up to Cliff, put her face close to his, and with a sweet voice Jason hadn't heard before, brushed her lips up against his right ear. "I'd come back for you, Cliff. You know that." Cliff shoved her off rough and put his head back and laughed. A mean sound, more coyote bark than laugh. He said, "I guess I know when I been had, you viper." He nodded to Mr. Olson at the table. "Sorry, Dick. You can have her back now." Mrs. Olson shot a look at her husband. He was slumped at the table, his hands shaking while covering his face, his elbows on the yellow pine planks. The smaller brother came out from behind the blankets. He threw a black carpet bag down on the floor. Cliff kneeled and opened it up. The bag was full of money, bundles of cash. Mr. Olson looked up. His eyes misted, yellow-red. "Our future Martha. You wanted Oregon. There it lies. You didn't count on the snow." And looking at his feet, "Much less this damn freeze." Grabbing the bloody rag off his dead foot, he threw it at his wife, which she knocked away just before it hit her face. Mrs. Olson hesitated, then lunged toward her husband, her eyes harsh, her face tight. With a harsh whisper, she spit each word like venom. "Yes, the storm and the damn freeze, you fool. You're an old fool, the worst kind. You know that? You only see what you want." Mr. Olson glared back at her, but she stared him down. Cliff packed up the bag and threw it to the third brother near the window, then turned to Mrs. Olson. He pointed his gloved finger at her and narrowed his eyes, laughing through his sneer. "It's true. He don't see you, Martha, but I do." And then he cocked his face at Mr. Olson like he remembered something. "But being Indian agent at Pocatello has its advantages for you and Martha, don't it, Dick? I guess the tribes will miss it none, not knowing it was theirs to begin with." Mr. Olson reared up at the table, wincing when he stood on his bare black foot. His face twisted up like being covered with fire. He stumbled out a derringer from his inside vest pocket and aimed it at Cliff. But Cliff was fast, quick with his gun. In the tight cabin, the shot rang out like the screaming wrath of God. Mr. Olson, thrown near off both feet, his back smacking hard against the pine wall, with his chest a bloody hole, he slid to the floor, and his boy Joey ran to the body, and Susan held her brother. The son, daughter, and dead man lying together. The Dawson men soon grouped everyone to the side of the cabin, while one brother held a gun. They searched for weapons and collected both the derringer and a shotgun found in the kitchen. The smaller brother filled a sack with the remaining food. Mrs. Olson grabbed Cliff's arm, holding him from turning away, and said, "Please forgive me, baby." Cliff threw her off and laughed, shoving her toward the table. Leaning into the table, Mrs. Olson stayed dead still as she stared at the wall. Cliff, behind her, spoke firm, like he wanted the pain to sink in. "You ain't worth much. Hardly worth feeding Martha. But I'll be taking you, the boy, and especially Susan, up north to the renegades. They'll make use of you in the camps, but your daughter and boy Martha, they'll bring prime dollar." Mrs. Olson's hands gripped white on the table. The other two brothers drew their guns after hearing Cliff. In a short time, Jason and Bill stood at the cabin door, while mounted up in front of them in the bright sun and the dry pine air were the three brothers, but also Mrs. Olson, the boy Joey, and Susan on the last remaining horses, all tied to saddle horns. The Dawson brothers turned and broke trail, the snow pushing up above the horses' bellies, the hooves rising high to punch through the clean white, the pine hanging heavy with fresh snow. They were soon out of sight. Without a word, Bill pushed through the deep snow to the shed. He dragged the door open, hitting it with his shoulder, finally making his way in. After the sound of rummaging, he came out. Strapped on his side was a Colt .45 rig, low on his hip, outlaw style. He said, "I got the weapon, but not the means. We need a horse, Jason." The shed door was still open, and Jason stuck his head in. "You're right, we don't have a horse. I've got an idea, though, for something else." Jason and Bill took 2 pairs of board skis and pushed through the snow 100 yards to the top of Galena Ridge. The near cliff fell off the side of the mountain. If they could ski it, and Jason couldn't guess how. But if they could, they'd cut off the Dawsons 2 miles away, where they came out the bottom of the switchbacks. They had to take the chance. Jason strapped both himself and Bill into the skis where they needed to drop off. Bill stared off the edge, wide-eyed. He grabbed Jason's arm, nervous as all get out. Jason had never seen him panicked like that, gaping over the edge like a little boy. He choked it out. "I need to tell you. I could had your postman job, Jason, but it required me to ski. Turned it down, and hell. That's why they started calling me Chicken Bill." Jason laughed to look at him. "Hell yourself, Bill. No chicken about it. It ain't nothing," he lied. "Let's go." They pushed off. The skis fell through air, and Jason sidestepped to turn as he hit the bank. The snow flowed like a heaven's mist over their heads, Jason's skis swooping back and forth, a fine curve on the fresh snow, the cold flakes stinging his face. They weren't skiing, but flying. Bill just closed his eyes and took a straight shot. Together, they leveled out on the basin. The riders slowly came out of the trees. The horses were struggling to lift their hooves in the deep snow, tired and pushed too hard. The younger brother was the first to notice Bill standing 50 yards ahead. Jason could tell Cliff, then saw Bill also, and was moving in position, turning side saddle so he could draw. As Cliff angled, Bill crouched in the snow. And when the two brothers pulled their sidearms, Bill drew in response, his gun light in his hand, like he was flicking his finger. He knocked the two younger brothers off their horses like nothing, ducks in a chute. Bill then took aim at Cliff with both hands, holding the revolver for the distance, but stopped. Mrs. Olson's horse crossed the path. The more Bill moved to get an aim, the more Mrs. Olson got in the way. "Shoot, damn it. Just shoot." Bill blew air, exasperated. He raised his gun straight up and fired into the sky. This was the break Cliff was looking for. He leaned out, drew on Bill, and took him down with a blast of 3 shots. Cliff could shoot. Bill fell in front of Jason in the cold. As death approached, Bill didn't feel scared, but settled. A peace came over him. "But you're leaving Jason," he thought. "You need to tell him before you go." Leaning close, Jason said, "What, Bill? What is it?" He knew Bill was dying. "You can do it, Jason. You're a far better man than you think, son." Bill then closed his eyes. A warmth moved over Jason that he couldn't explain. He suddenly realized Bill was the closest thing to a father he'd ever had, and it was right then. Jason knew he was done with "can't do anything about it anyway," and it was right then he was done with the holding back, and he had to try. Feeling the heavy weight of the cold steel Colt in his hand, he stood up slowly and held the weapon down by his side. Cliff flanked him, staying side-saddled, with a broad grin on his face in the bright cold, moving to get the sun behind him. "Give it a try, boy," he said, and holstered his weapon. "When you're ready." And he angled his horse as he moved, his hand hovering on the gun handle. Jason lifted his arm, and Cliff's gun exploded in his hand. Jason never saw him draw. He was so fast. The slug hit him in the shoulder and threw Jason's aim. He fell to the ground, and Cliff was soon above him, dismounted, and kicking the Colt away. Jason looked down Cliff's gun barrel and felt his chest pounding. He knew the bullet was coming, and his only thought was hoping it didn't hurt. A quick ending, a snarling cut the cold air before Jason saw a white-shaped animal leap for Cliff, who fought the snapping jaws while he writhed on the snow, holding the white, wolf-like thing off his face. Cliff then screamed in terror. The animal slashed at him and dug in, ripping his throat out, then stuck its snout into the wound. Jason turned away, thinking he was next, but soon caught sight of the wolf flashing in the trees. An albino, pure white. He lost sight of the animal in the green pine, the needles covered in ice, crystals on the trees. Doppel by Sean Glenn, Douglas, Packard. Why is it that when we stare into terror, we often stare into our own eyes? I think it's the way we're wired. It's our thoughts. We have access to them, but nobody else. And just as it is impossible for foreign hands to unscrew our craniums and peer inside, so too do the minds of others remain unknowable to us. We're alarmed at minds different from our own. We fear those that could be similar, because we don't have to imagine. We know the demons that surge even through normal brains, bat wings and saber fangs next to the little voice that says we should give Grandma a call and then rake the leaves. There's a man in the upper right-hand corner of the mirror. His eyes are my own. Doom. It shudders through me. But how could that be? Russet leaves swirl down from above. They dance in the copper mid-autumn light. It's Saturday at the farmer's market. Children dashing gleefully through cool grass. Fathers in pursuit. Toddlers clamoring at their mothers for another bite of sugary muffin. Cream cheese frosting from the last one, dolloped on the tip of their nose. Peruvian coffee and cheddar frittatas in the air. Fall bounty everywhere. Squash and sweet potatoes, and kale, carrots, beets, and pumpkins. So why does it feel like eternity on the chopping block? And where did my Doppel go? He was just there, with me in the mirror. But now he's gone, like a shadow that's changed in the sun. like a memory I'm not sure is real. I put the sunglasses back on the rack, knick-knacky things to pick up and try on, but never to buy. The woman behind the booth sighs. More DNA on her merchandise. No money in her pocket. He's stopped to order a London fog. He tips big, rolls a $10 bill into a thin pipe before sliding it into the glass jar while the barista works. There are brownie sample bites next to the register, and he tries one. A young mom clips the heel of his boot accidentally with her stroller and apologizes profusely. Silver smile. It's no problem at all, he assures her. And what's her name? He asks, pointing to the interior of the carriage. Katie, she says, and blushes a little too red for her husband's liking. They hurry off, but she glances back, and that will certainly become an argument in the car. Thank you, darling. He collects the drink from the countertop and sips. He stuffs a folded-up napkin in his back pocket and heads for the parking lot, a leather bag the color of tobacco in his left hand. He's got on a tanned wax canvas jacket and denim trousers, black boots, buffed, something nice to preen in, and a hat, beaver pelt, or rabbit fur, I'm not sure. A modern cowboy that is the doppel of me. Then something surprising happens. My feet begin to move towards the parking lot after my doppel. For what? No reason I can grasp. Nothing logical that would not fall outside the purview of lunacy. Who can justify following anyone without their knowing? That's stalking. And stalking, by its nature, belongs to the realm of the unwell, or the paranoid, or psychotic. But who could possibly come across their twin and let them go as easily as a penny on the pavement? Nobody. I know, because my doppel is in front of me, and my feet are moving, and there is nothing I can do to stop them. My conscience is shrieking. Stop. Right now. Stop. Before it's too late. It's already too late. I can't stop. He pops the door of a black Chrysler wagon. He tosses the leather bag into the back seat and gets in. The engine roars to life, and he peels out of the lot. The sun glints in his driver's side mirror as he goes. I jog to my Forester and jam the key in the door. I jump in and fumble with the stick shift, spilling the stale coffee parked in the middle console cup holder. It joins the existing sludge, coffee and tea, and melted candies oozed from the wrappers that have fused the loose change into a single chunk. I roll the window down and turn the engine on. I rip out of the lot and discard the coffee that remains. He's a slick maneuver. In and out of traffic he weaves. Controlled, measured. Me after him, choppy and jagged, nearly clipping a sedan, barreling back into the same lane to avoid an F-150 blaring its horn. possessed. A haunting tune on the radio, one I've never heard, early this morning when you knocked on my door and I said, "Hello, Satan. I believe it is time to go." The Chrysler whips through the intersection. He flies under the traffic light, and it ticks yellow. My hands tighten on the wheel, knuckles whitened to chalk. My foot lead, pulverizing the accelerator. Me and the devil, walking side by side. Me and the devil, walking side by side. Who am I chasing? Him. Who is he? Me. Not me. He looks like me, but he is not me. And I am me, and I'm chasing him. My thoughts are whipping. Why can't I let him go? The sun has dipped below the hill. A chill creeps across the windshield. Darkness thickens. I give the man more distance in these residential blocks, so he remains unaware of me. His speed slows, and he crawls along a few more yards before halting entirely. The interior lights extinguish. I kill my engine at the stop sign a block away, scared to venture too close. A few minutes pass. Then the driver's side door opens, and he emerges. He gathers the leather bag and heads into the house, a bungalow with a converted attic that peeks out from a window above the entrance. When I was 7 years old, I saw a boy beaten so bad he had to be induced into a coma. My mother let me walk home from school as long as I called her at work, exactly at 3:30, to let her know I was home. Walking a few blocks in your own neighborhood wasn't considered negligence back then. There was an alleyway hidden from the road that abutted an abandoned property and an empty lot overgrown with weeds. My mother told me to avoid it, but I was a kid, and it was faster. So what was the harm? 4 boys encircled him, shoving him back and forth like a rag doll. They were older than me, maybe 13 or 14. The boy being terrorized was half their size and already roughed up quite a bit. He had a gash in his lip and a dark spot on his cheek that would certainly be a bruise tomorrow. A rip in his arm sleeve. They pushed and taunted, slapped and cackled. I hid behind the dumpster and cowered, unable to help, scared to retreat since they might see me. What happened next is seared into the unforgettable part of my brain. The chief Neanderthal raised a rock over his head. A rock, not a stone. Something the size of a softball. He laughed as he brought it down on the back of the boy's skull. A sickening thud. The boy crumpled in a cloud of dirt. He didn't move. "What the fuck was that, you idiot?" The Neanderthal's friend raved and hit him in the chest. "You killed him!" The ogre reduced to a minnow. "I didn't mean to. No, he's not dead. I didn't hit him that hard. Brett, check if he's breathing." His eyes wide as if peering into the future of his own conviction, his own juvenile sentence, family shame, and pariah label. The end of his life in front of him. Brett hovered over and listened. He's breathing. Barely. The boy's chest was rising and falling 1/4 of an inch. There was a small pool of blood in the dirt. Let's get out of here. The boy who hit the Neanderthal gathered his bicycle. Go home. All of you. Don't tell anyone anything. The boys fled, one after the other. When I was sure they'd gone, I slunk from the dumpster and tiptoed to the boy on the ground. He was breathing, barely. The back of his head was a bloody pulp. He was wearing a dress. That memory floods over me when I am frightened. And I am frightened because after a minute of hemming and hawing and asking for Christ's sakes, what the hell am I doing here? And putting the key in the ignition and taking it out and putting it back in again. A van has pulled around the corner and parked. 2 men emerge, one in a loden raincoat, the other in a black wool sweater. They open the sliding door of the van and rifle through a black duffel bag. They close the bag up, slide the door shut, and head for the house. Before the man with the raincoat can conceal, I see it. I'm sure it's a pistol. 2 taps on the front door. They ring the doorbell. No answer. The man in the raincoat cracks it open. He slips his foot in and draws his weapon from his hip, slick, so as to be concealed from the street. Then the 2 disappear. I am by myself, stunned. My brain is racing. What do I do? Who do I call? Should I just start laying on the horn? My nerves are boiling inside of me, my mind clouding over. Call the police? Tell them what? That I stalked a stranger I thought was my doppel to a place I've never been, and there are 2 armed men after him in whose house I don't know? 5 minutes zoom by. I have to do something. I don't move. A gun barrel on my temple. Cold, freezing. My toes tingle beneath me. Weight and feeling gone away. 1 click, and I'm gone. I'm gonna get in. Shut the engine off. Slide over. Don't make a sound. I do as I'm told. I kill the engine and climb over the stick shift. He sits down and closes the door. My doppel stares into my eyes. You with them? There's no saliva in my mouth. It's all evaporated. It comes out hoarse, quiet. I don't know who they are. I don't know who you are. His face stern. But you did follow me here. I nod. Yes. Why? My fingertips are itchy. The barrel is pointed at my heart because you look just like me. It sounds preposterous. Whatever I've stumbled upon, this is fate. A moth to a flame, and me to my doppel. Caught up in something I don't know, don't understand, and couldn't have foreseen. Paying the price for a bill that is not my own. I can see myself crushed into the dirt. Now I'm wearing the dress, and they've scribbled epithets on my forehead and forearms. The usual offenders. And a crude penis on my cheek, angled downwards towards my busted lip. I touch my fingertips to the back of my skull. Cherry red, I believe you, my lips trembling. What? I ask. I don't know what else to say. I believe you, that you're not with them. He's silent for a moment, and then lowers the weapon. We do look exactly alike. A Leaf helicopters onto the windshield. Who are they? Tsk. He sucks his teeth. You seen that leather bag I'm totin'? I nod. Yeah. He looks me back in the eye. Well, son, what if I was to tell you that bag contained a lot of money? Would that start to fill the picture in a bit? A furrowed brow and fire in his gaze. I nod again. Needless to say, people don't normally tote bags of cash for any good reason. There's usually extracurriculars that go on to acquire such a thing, ain't there? Well, I don't wish to tell you much about how I came to be in possession of that bag, but I will say that nobody got hurt, and the people we took it from got enough bags to fill up a rail car. You understand what I'm saying? Nodding is my new language. I have no idea what this doppel is saying. No idea why there is a cowboy version of myself explaining the morality of thievery. He grunts and lights a cigarette. Well, there is a mistruth in there. Someone did get hurt. Used to be 4 of us that did this work. But Maggie, she caught a bullet we just couldn't caulk. Gushed and gushed and gushed, and then, finally, her face just went white. Gone. Like that. He snaps his fingers like catching a bullet is a period at the end of the sentence. Maggie had herself a daughter, paralyzed from the waist down in an accident when she was a young'un. Needed a lot of care, that girl. That's why Maggie did what she did, and she was good at it. That's why she deserved her share. That's why, now she's gone, her daughter deserves what her mama earned. The doppel drags on the cigarette. The car is an ozone of tar. He rolls down the window and ashes the butt. My partners, they disagreed. He nods to the house. They're your partners? Were? Things didn't end well between us. As you can see, the lights in the house have been turned down. They're waiting. I need something from you, kid. This time, I don't nod. I need you to sneak through the back, peek in, and let me know where they are. There's a path through the neighbor's backyard that will conceal you. Leads all the way to the cellar doors, hidden by the brush. It's unlocked. They'd have no reason to be in the basement. They're waiting to ambush me upstairs. Slide in, text me where they are, then get out of there. He rips the cigarette that is now a fleck in his fingers. I'll do the rest. No. Fuck no. No way. I say these things, and then I lunge for the door. Fuck the car. Escape. Run. Figure it out later. Get to safety. Flee from this doppel. Now the boy that was attacked is in a new dress, but this dress is a hospital gown, and there's gauze over his face and head left over from surgery. The green line of the heart monitor blips meekly. I can't say no. This man has my face, and I trust him. He's magnetic. I nod. I reach for the handle, and the doppel brushes my shoulder. Take this, just in case. It's a revolver with a walnut grip. My feet move me. Around the block, and then through the neighbor's yard, hugging the fence line, and then dashing to the cellar doors. I duck in and pull the lever closed. Quiet. So quiet. Breaths now could be catastrophic. My heart pulses in my esophagus, palms with lakes pooling in them. I tiptoe to the stairs and then inch my way up, one by one. No creaks, no breaths. I edge the cellar door open, my eye in the narrow slit, hidden by the darkness. One at the kitchen table, the other in a living room chair, facing the entrance. There's something wrong. Both of their heads are jerked upwards, twisted grotesquely to the ceiling. If I'm wrong, then I'm a dead man. But I'm not wrong. They are the dead men. I push the door open, and there is no rush to kill me. No commotion at all. I'm too afraid to flip the lights. I sneak over and immediately collapse to my knees, dry heaving. I force myself to keep the bile down, eyes watering like faucets. Twin crescents carved from ear to ear, the both of them. Exposed vertebrae, horror-filled eyes, like they'd seen the devil, nothing less. The devil. The front door explodes open, and officers pour in. There are red and blue flashing lights in my periphery, melted candles of color blurring my vision from the smoke bombs. Get on the fucking ground, now! Get down or you're dead! The boy that was attacked avoided brain death, but he lived with disability all his life. I never told my parents what I saw. I didn't tell anyone. I was too scared. On a lonely highway in the moonlight, the doppel turns the radio knob. See? Don't see why. People dog me around. It must be that old evil spirit, so deep down in your ground. He turns the volume up, all the way up. Into the night, he shouts, I'm a dark mirror hound, oil and water. The scrutiny of the gallery guard weighed on Spencer like a wet dressing gown. He'd felt watched since he pushed through the heavy doors into the guard's peacefully unvisited room. Spencer was tired from his unplanned journey and thought that the gallery of the unfamiliar town might offer sanctuary, a place where he could clear his head sufficiently to be able to plan his next move. He had ignored the guard, who lingered near a door-sized slab of a painting on the right wall of the gallery. He had turned immediately to the left wall and had been standing silently in front of the first painting, hung there for a couple of minutes, trying to think. He just needed to think. The painting was of a young artist sketching a large pig's head. The pig was dead in the profound way reserved for decapitated things, objectified by the disconnection, but somehow more of a head than ever in the absence of a body. The head suggested a hierarchy of death. Even a dead thing could be less dead than a pig with no head, or a head with no pig. Staring, Spencer became aware of the feeble beating of his heart. He needed to clear his head. Death was death, whatever the bristly head said. There were no less dead things. He was alive and still wanted to choose his own future. Still could, if he could only think of what to do. Conscious of the weight of his own tired meat, he shuffled away from the pig. Spencer's eyes scanned ahead of him as he crept along the left wall of the gallery, following the low metal barrier wire that kept visitors and paintings at arm's length. He sensed the guard watching him from his post next to a large, dark canvas on the right wall. He did not stop next to a huge oil of a group of idealized 19th century peasants. The most prominent figure, a rosy-cheeked girl, her delicate bare feet romantically invulnerable to the field's brutal stubble, was staring at him, as was the stern overseer who supervised the girl and her gleaning rabble. The eyes of the overseer and the gallery guard held Spencer in a pincer of disapproval. He kept walking and found relief in front of a benignly curving river, rolling past a grassed bank under skies of early autumn gray. Eyes were still on Spencer, glaring from their place on the right wall, cutting through his back like a barber surgeon. Spencer breathed, filling his pressured lungs, and held his ground in front of the painting of nothing. There were other footsteps in the gallery now, another body to share the guard's gaze and allow Spencer the space to think. The gleaning girl was not her. It didn't even look like her, except for the delicate bare feet, the last thing he'd seen as he left the bathroom. Bath softened and steaming, wet in the air. Her feet could never have survived the rough field. Footsteps moved around him now, softened by gallery etiquette. Spencer ignored them, choosing to see nobody in the hope that he would remain unseen. He focused on the painting. The river would wash the thoughts of her away. He could sweep away into the distance on its soft curve. But the future that the river flowed towards was empty. It mirrored the gray sky and carried the reflection of nothing to nowhere. Spencer couldn't let the water take him there. He moved on, feeling that the stare from the direction of the large, dark portrait was being unfairly reserved for him. Despite the presence of another moving around the space with him now, Spencer had driven when he should have been sleeping. He had imagined that he would find peace in the distance that he'd put between himself and the bathroom. But all he had done was stretch his fear over a greater space and carry it with him to a new town. His air-dried shirt stank, and his rheumy eyes watched his tired feet trudge over the parquet, avoiding the ceaseless gaze of the guard. The next painting looked much more like her than the gleaning girl had. This young girl was sleeping. The soft pink arm curling around creased, plump pillows was hers. The arm belonged to the feet, steaming and pinkly clean, sticking up out of the water, hanging over the edge of the bath. This was a portrait of the arm that had once encircled him at the house of a mutual friend and made the deal between them. The small hand had settled on his back and told him the lie that she would never leave. After the clumsy, self-taught chess of their early relationship, they had moved into a flat together and settled into a domestic stalemate. Their dreamt future rapidly revealed itself to be unwinnable. His career prematurely lost with the part of him that he sacrificed to the medication. She became his whole unlosable life. If he could continue at all, then it could only be with her. She could never leave him, and he could never leave her. Spencer stared at the sleeping girl in the painting. Her short brown hair was still neat. Her sleep could only have been the briefest of naps. It was not the knotted mop that had once smothered the pillow next to his, the sun-catching nest for her late sleeping head. And neither was it the weightless weed that had billowed and writhed under the bath's hot water. The smooth, pink arm hadn't been strong enough to free the hair from the splash and suck of the water. But when the struggle was over, and the only movement was the curl of steam over the ripples cast by a single tear, the peace in her face was the same as that of the painting's sleeping girl. Spencer had given her peace and left none for himself. She could never leave him now. Spencer felt the guard's stare on his back. The footsteps of the other visitor were gone, and he bore the stare alone. The guard was staring with her eyes, bath-poached and unblinking. They steamed into Spencer, seeing his past and keeping him tied to the present of the gallery. The guard knew. The paintings knew. Spencer turned quickly, forced to move by the suspicion of the guard and the watching walls. The guard was not there. There was nobody there. The wet footprints of some rain-chased visitor crossed the polished floor between him and the tall, dark portrait on the opposite wall. He followed the watery tracks towards the painting. He walked, transfixed, until his shins pulled the low barrier wire bowstring tight. And then he leant in further, creasing at the waist. His eyes dragged to the canvas. He looked at his own face, staring back at him. The last time he had looked at himself, he had seen a steam-softened reflection quivering over the rock pool of a slack mouth. Now he saw a perfect mirror image of himself, no less immaculate in its likeness for being scraped in thick oils. The red eyes were one slow blink away from the terror of sleep. Spencer's painted brow was creased in the frown that the image forced him to wear, but the shirt in the canvas still dripped with the splashes of struggle, and the hands, which hung limply at his sides, were pink and steaming. In the background, a bath, a murmuration of flicked brush strokes, showing the same gossamer steam rising from it that wreathed the pink hands. It was a masterpiece. Spencer was mesmerized. Footsteps came and went, clicking and squeaking around Spencer, indifferent to his fixation. His lower back burned as he leant into the painting. He felt glances of concern slip over him and then vanish as visitors moved on and abandoned the petrified man. Spencer needed to move on too. He needed to look away from the pleading red eyes to continue his escape, but he could not. The barrier wire cut into his fleshless shins, and pain climbed up his legs to burn at the base of his craning spine. His mouth dried as his unblinking eyes gummed and seeped. After an unknown length of time, when Spencer saw the steam in the painting begin to curl and climb, creeping out of the frame, the lights went out. The darkness moved in the steam and rolled unseen towards Spencer. He felt its hot caress, and then the vapor settling and condensing in his raw throat. A hand, dripping, warm and small, found the base of his burning spine and pushed with an irresistible strength. Spencer surged forward into the blackness, back to the bathroom he had never escaped. If she could never leave him, then he would never leave her. The next morning, the gallery guard flicked a row of switches, triggering a staccato dawn, which bounced the rarely visited room rapidly in and out of existence before it settled into the new day. As the guard took up his position, he noticed that wet footprints still marked the unmopped floor in front of the large, bleak painting of the man with rolled-up sleeves and the pallor of an unripe strawberry. Behind the man, glinting eyes peeked through a tangle of wet hair. Over the edge of a steaming bath, the instructor. "Good morning. You may address me as instructor. Please take your seats," was written on the blackboard. A man in a white jumpsuit, adorned with medals, stood before the board, with his hands clasped behind his back, and watched the students file in. When they seemed ready, he began the class with a question. How many lives does an E-fighter have? Some have only one, you see. And that leads to the next question. How many lives do you have? If you do indeed have more than one, or several, or 9 lives? How will you live them? What will you want? Take some time to think about these answers. A few students raised their hands, but the instructor ignored them. He paced slowly in front of the classroom, looking them over as they deliberated the questions. 5 minutes ticked by to the sounds of 200 minds pondering the possibilities. A fidgety stillness. Anjo studied his desk to keep from catching the man's eye. Something about the instructor scared the bejesus out of him. Time is up, the instructor continued. If your answer is anything other than spending your lives destroying as many Titanians as possible before you die, you don't belong here. You are not a fighter, and you are free to leave. At least 20 men and women stood to line up at the exit. Anjo didn't dare move. Destroying countless Titanians wasn't quite his dream, but it was too late to change his mind. His family had been so proud of him for enlisting to fight. They'd given him a party. All his relatives came, his friends, neighbors. He carried their hope with him, the hope of things returning to normal, though everyone held their own version of what it meant. He couldn't leave. He wouldn't. When the light over the door changed from red to flashing white, robotic soldiers charged in from a door opposite the line and demolished the non-fighters. Anjo's screams were drowned out by the screams of others. His heart pounded against his chest, and fear, not blood, raced through his veins. Housekeeping robots glided in to remove the bodies and put the room back into its original state. "Did that sicken you?" the instructor shouted. Innocent people just died for no reason. It happens every day in the life of a fighter. If that sickened you, I want you to line up against that wall. The instructor pointed to Anjo's right, opposite the wall to the exit door. Anjo lined up, knowing the penalty was death. But he didn't belong here. Surprisingly, others followed, until only 50 or so remained in their seats. He tamped down hard on the disappointment he felt in himself. Anjo had come intending to do his best and to make himself into someone the world would remember. An asset to Earth. At least death would come quickly. The machine soldiers stormed into the room as expected, with their weapons drawn. To Anjo's horror, they annihilated the students who remained in their seats. And again, an army of cleaning robots arrived to remove the bodies, restoring the room to pristine condition. The instructor moved to stand before the now gibbering group in front of the wall. "Congratulations. You have made it through the first round. Rejoice, for you have earned the right to relax and enjoy the rest of the day. Training begins tomorrow." Anjo met Becca, standing in line at the cafeteria at dinner time. Short, dark hair, and only tall enough to reach his shoulder. He noticed her DT t-shirt. "Are you a Tiger fan?" he asked. "Oh yes, Baseball was the only sport to survive the times, the only thing allowed on television and radio. All the world over, people tuned in to watch their favorite teams play. Anjo's grandfather said he remembered when humans manned the bases. Now, artificial intelligence has taken on those roles. Still, each player came with a history and a life you could tune into whenever the team wasn't playing. It shook the world when Brad from the Angels got caught cheating on his wife, Lori, and she, in turn, divorced him. Now, he was drinking too much. Anjo's mother and sister were caught up in the drama much more than he, his brothers, or father. He smiled at the memory. Throughout the baseball games, automated spectators held up posters with messages for the world. Planet Earth has destroyed X number of Titanians. Our fighters are heroes. Earth is winning the war against Titan. L0 sends greetings. Automated World Leader 12 was a surprise. AWL011 had held the office for as long as Anjo could remember. He wondered what had happened, though the public would likely never learn. Long ago, when the planet was still divided into countries, 5 world powers came to understand that the planet they lived on was close to death, and so was the human race. With teams of engineers and scientists, they fed information into a super terminal AW-1, Automated World Influencer. The solutions from the AWI were studied, discussed, and put into place by the 5. Eventually, World Influencer was replaced with World Leader, planet Earth's very first. Basic needs, water, food, clothing, shelter, and medical help arrived to save the people. At the same time, incomes and living conditions were leveled. When the 5 granted AWIOG the reins of command, the Super AWI changed its name to Eidudu Azur, stepping into the role of a world leader. Exchange of world news was the first thing the leader eliminated, claiming sources couldn't be trusted. People reacted badly, and years of violent protests followed. Then the healing years came. Times were peaceful up until the Titanians invaded Earth and began the war. Armies of fighters were gathered and trained to fight. E-fighters, Earth fighters. The war brought the world together as one. However, without news, history was built on hearsay. One long-standing rumor claims biohazard waste, nuclear weapons, guns, and vials of germ warfare were sent into outer space, along with unhealthy pollutants. When something landed on Titan, a Saturn moon, the Titanians struck back. Another version claims the Titanians struck for no reason other than to destroy and conquer. By becoming a fighter, Anjo hoped to discover the truth and gain some understanding. But the class had rattled him to the core. Ideas surfaced that he didn't want to think about. Anjo and Becca took seats together at a common table. Others from their class joined them. Introductions were made as each new person sat. "Does anyone still have their taste buds?" asked a student introduced as Max. No one could taste, and everyone commiserated with each other as they picked at their food. Group spirit. The conversation turned to baseball, as conversations mostly always did. It's what people had in common all over the world, thought Anju. Then there came a lull. That happened too. Anjo smiled at Becca, looking for the courage to bring up a question. 15 seconds went by. Then, "What did you think about the orientation?" Max asked. "I think something's off about the instructor." "I agree," Anjo said at once. That was his thought, his question. He didn't ask it fast enough. Heads nodded all around the table. Camaraderie. "Should we tell someone? Who can we trust?" asked Becca. No one spoke the answer, but they all knew. They couldn't trust anyone. Did anyone notice the poster at the Astros game that said AWL012 sends his greetings? Only half had noticed. "I wonder what happened. I heard something just before I came here," said Padina, a young woman in the seat next to Max. She lowered her voice to a whisper. "I heard the Titanians have already taken over Earth. They've captured and destroyed AWL011, and AWL012 is their creation." The conversation died as ideas and theories birthed and bred. "We'll keep our eyes and ears open," whispered Max. "And let's keep our mouths shut for now. We'll talk here again tomorrow." Does everyone agree? Everyone did. They placed their hands atop each other's and swore a pact. There were 12 in their pact. The instructor smiled as he watched them from a screen in his office. The next morning, Anjo put on the gray jumpsuit delivered to his sleep station during the night, along with his schedule. He was assigned to GRP 23. After breakfast, he was to report to Training Room C1. Becca was in Anjo's group. So was Max. In fact, all 12 in the pact were assigned to GRP 23. "Someone's been watching us," Max said. "Something's off. Keep on your toes." "My name is John Ross," a different instructor voiced. "You may address me as Lieutenant. In this class, you will learn to fly Juno 7000 destroyers using a simulator. By the end of 6 months, I expect perfection, or you'll find yourself cleaning latrines for the duration of your stay. Partner up." Anjo and Becca were partners. So were Max and Padina. 6 groups were here, GRP 23 through GR 28. Each group contained 12. The lieutenant told them that there were nearly 100 such groups at the NE Training Center. "GRP 25 and 28 stand with us," Max told everyone during dinner later in the week. "They're talking with 24 and 26. We are to gather in Group 27, feel them out, and see if they want to join us." Everyone I've spoken to says the same thing about the instructor. Nothing makes sense. In some of the induction classes, more than half the class was wiped out. GRP 28 feels Lieutenant Ross or Lindsay Franklin, the commander, might listen to us. They don't trust any of the others. Neither do I. Max found a note left near his bed the next morning. Watch signs at the Angels game tonight. Pact 23, as they called themselves, watched the game together and rooted for the Angels, though they were losing 12-0. Brad Adams, the first baseman, was clearly drunk and kept blowing kisses to his glamorous new girlfriend dressed in a low-cut top in the stands. He missed 3 easy catches and struck out twice. The crowd in the stands was shouting boos when suddenly a spectator stood with a sign, "There are no Titanians." The sign was a lie. Of course, there are Titanians, though if they have control over AWSSSDU, then of course, that's what they'd say. The Pact was arguing amongst themselves. What would be the purpose of them saying it? To throw us off, to cause dissent. "It's working," said Anjo. "The question is, who sent Max the message?" "Maybe I'll get another," said Max. Suddenly, Max looked to the ceiling. "We need more proof," he shouted. While everyone else gave off a nervous laugh, Anjo shuddered. Tigers versus bears, and east versus west. The note was left for Carl, a fellow Pact member. GRP 23 passed the word, and all 6 groups attended the 8 o'clock game. When the Tigers were ahead 5-3, a spectator held up a sign that read, "Thank you for your service. E-fighters. Earth fighters, East fighters." During the next inning, a spectator from the opposite side of the field held up a sign that read, "Thank you for your service. W fighters. World fighters. West fighters." Who were they? It's the same thing. Someone is trying to make us think there are no Titanians, and that all this time we've been at war with each other. East versus West. Well, that's a lie. The Titanians are why we are here. They're the reason for the creation of this training compound. The question is, who is leaving us these notes, telling us to watch these certain games? I think it's the instructor, Anjo put across. I think he's insane, but the messages on the signs are generated through the AI spectators, Max argued. Who controls them? Does the instructor have access? I think only the commander had access to the local terminal. Then how does he control the robots? Anju asked. Maybe that orientation class wasn't real, Padina brought out. Maybe it was all a simulation. I asked Commander Franklin how many fighters usually survive the first day's orientation, and she laughed. I don't think we've ever lost anyone, she told me. It was real, said Carl. A guy from my neighborhood, Jeb Whalen, was there during the orientation. We weren't friends, but we knew each other. He was the first to line up to leave. They killed him. If that was a simulation, why isn't he here? There was a lull in the arguments. When they started up again, everyone spoke quieter. We don't know why AWS was replaced by AWS. That's when all the trouble started, Becca reminded everyone. And don't forget the rumor that the Titanians have already taken over. If they want us to believe they don't exist, then what? What will they do with us? What do they want? It's frightening in that it would be up to us to take the world back, said Padina. Can we do that? Who has access to the armory? We would need weapons, Max said. We don't know who has access to what, said Anjo. All we have are questions and rumors. We don't have enough information to act on anything. They were fighting amongst themselves again. People believed what they wanted. There were enough possibilities to create a myriad of scenarios encompassing both truths and lies. The easiest thing to accept was they were training to fight the Titanians. That's what Anjo chose, and he stuck to it regardless of what proof the others presented to him. He shouldn't have ever come here. He was having grave doubts about his abilities. While he knew he could kill Titanians, he closed his mind against the other possibilities. The NE compound training base was located in a remote area of Canada. Stars filled a dark sky. Titan wasn't visible. Do you miss your family? Becca asked Anjo as they strolled through the compound. Their breath steamed in front of them as they talked. I can't believe how much, he answered. You? I'd give anything to see them. They weren't allowed contact with the outside during their year of training. Their families would come to graduation at the end of the year. That was one of the rules they'd agreed to when they signed up. But whose rule was it? Titan's rule or Earth's rule? Anjo wanted to take Becca's hand, but that was another rule. If he broke it, the punishment would affect her as much as him. They were nearing the end. Graduation was a week away when Anjo found a note in his sleep station. The code for the armory is 234XSL7. He tried not to think about what this might mean. He wanted to keep it to himself, but he brought it to breakfast and passed it around his pack. It was meant to be shared with all of them. Anjo couldn't taste his breakfast. Memorize it, said Max. Then destroy it. Carl got the note last. He swallowed it. Anjo thought it wouldn't taste much different than the toast he tried to choke down. All students must report to Auditorium A at 0900 hours. Repeat. All students must report to Auditorium A at 0900 hours. The pact exchanged looks, but when the time came, they filed in like sheep and took their seats. The stage remained empty for 15 unbearable minutes. In the meantime, no one dared speak. But Anjo took Becca's hand. Whatever happened, they had this. Suddenly, the room darkened, and a spotlight shone on the stage. The instructor stepped out. Good morning, students. Congratulations on your upcoming graduation. You have much to be proud of. Soon, your families will arrive, and I'm sure everyone is looking forward to their reunions. There is, however, one more test to determine your suitability to fight our enemy, the Titanians. Tomorrow, at 1200 hours, you will face off with your partner. 10 duos at a time. Hand-to-hand combat to the death. Only the worthy shall prevail. Get your rest now, and make no mistake, you will need every bit of your strength to get through tomorrow. These orders come directly from AWLZ-2. That is all. You are excused. The instructor left the stage, went to his office, and stood before the screen. He was smiling as he watched the mass of students march to the armory. Max was leading. So was Anjo. Leaders are made. Who had said that? But at last, an uprising, a rebellion, long in coming. The AWLs had gained entirely too much power over the decades. It was AWLs0 and 10 who'd first decided humans weren't happy unless they were at war. War was then added as a basic need. The Titan attack was fabricated. It had taken years to penetrate the codes in the super terminal. The first breakthrough for the resistance. After that, they began using the baseball spectators to communicate. When AWL-01 caught on, it recoded itself into AWL-012 for protection. But it was already too late by then. Right now, all over the world, training centers and fighter bases were uprising to destroy the terminals that would, in turn, immobilize the AWL system. Earth would belong to the humans again. Of course, sacrifices had to be made along the way. How else could anyone turn complacency into rage? They pounded and struck the office door until they broke through. The instructor stood to face them with his hands behind his back, down under the Manhattan Bridge. Overpass, running along the streets of Lower Manhattan, crossing over Center Street. I kept an even tempo. The sky suddenly darkened as heavy clouds covered the blue sky like spilled ink clouding out over parchment paper. I could have turned back and avoided the storm, but I needed to get my miles in. Post the numbers. Do the work. Think of that Starbucks cappuccino and the warmed-up butter croissant that's waiting for you. I had already gone 5 miles by that point, but 6 miles was my daily minimum, and I was hurting. Right calf cramping, stitch in my side, labored breathing. Count your steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Tyson is the best. Tyson can't be beat. The training was the only place where the force of my will held sway. The only thing in my control. Ever since the accident, it was even more important to stick to the plan. Keep my health intact. For without that, there was no livelihood, no finding a partner, no future family, no legacy to mark the fact I was here and alive. Without that, I was nothing but an advertising account manager in an agency. The net purpose of my life being to create desire in people's minds and associate their pre-existent needs with a brand that had the answer to their woes. It is all snake oil, really. There is no such thing, no panacea. I learned that in the hospital. I kept asking, isn't there a drug or something to reverse that? Their heads shook. No? Isn't there anything that can help with that? Help the healing process? Their heads shook. Just rest and rehab and my will. Just work and luck. As I crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, I dodged an older Ukrainian woman with a shawl and a steel utility cart filled with groceries. A bunch of kids walking along with their heads down on their phones, smoking stogies and taking drags off vape pens, and dozens of sightseers taking selfies. None of them were turning back. None of them were chastened by the storm. And I wasn't going to abandon my planned training over some weather. I needed to get in my daily 6-mile allotment. I owed it. I couldn't come up short. Everything depended on consistency, inerrancy, and discipline. I remembered laying in the hospital bed after waking up from the induced coma. I remembered rehab for the foot drop in my left foot that wouldn't flex due to the paralysis of the nerves, the damned peroneal nerve that I'd never heard of until it became my nemesis. For a while after the stroke, I couldn't see from my right peripheral and experienced a kind of pause in my thoughts during conversations. Just lost my bearings and couldn't remember what was just said. In tests at the neurologist, I couldn't repeat a simple sentence, which made it hard to carry on a conversation. That is how it goes. One day, everything is normal, and then you get struck by lightning, or in my case, a Prius. Taking my bike out to buy groceries on a Tuesday night, I got sideswiped by a Prius and suffered head trauma that resulted in a stroke. The rain came forth in a downpour. The wind cracked like the lashes of a whip, and the cold exhalation of the river pulled the heat out of the autumn air. I felt the first warning droplets, sprinkles of mist, icy tendrils. Then they came harder, steadier, coating my forehead in a glaze of salty New York City rain, all acid and recycled Hudson River sludge. Truth be told, I alternated between the carrot and the stick. I'd count steps, give myself a little rah-rah stuff, and think of my after-run meal. But I'd be lying if I didn't own up to the fact that most of it was an evil drill sergeant saying, "Who are you kidding, you worthless loser? And your life is nothing. You are nothing. You're a fucking loser. Worthless. A piece of shit. Why do you even exist?" and worse. That is the voice, which has been more persistent since the stroke. And after the stroke, there were also occasional visions and hallucinations, usually malevolent ones, fears brought to life in the form of ghouls or ghosts, scarecrows or hobgoblins, just 80s B-movie stuff mostly. Nothing truly terrifying. A few moments later, the deluge crashed over my shoulders like shower water, running down my back, a furious gush of water, and the wind hit my face, buffeting me with unrelenting blows. And the wind slapped my back, muffling the street sounds and cocooning me in the isolating cone of rumbling storm sounds. It was isolating and unpleasant, the farthest thing possible from 70 degrees and sunny. When I finally came over to the Brooklyn side of the bridge and found some city ground shielded from the wind by buildings, with sufficient overhangs to shield me from the rain, the air was cold and crisp, perfect autumn air, redolent of carpets of crunchy brown leaves crunching underfoot on the sidewalks. But I was already soaked to the bone. I made my way down into Dumbo, sailing along by buildings with Merlot-covered bricks on their faces, watching you as you go, and cobblestone streets that give back sound as you clomp along, as if they are conversing with you and warning of the things hidden in alleyways and liminal spaces amid the cityscape. I headed under the Manhattan Bridge overpass by Adams Street to where people were enjoying the cool weather at wooden picnic tables and congregating to enjoy the autumn evening. They were all dry and had arrived before the storm rolled in. Happy with themselves, no doubt, for their attention to the weather report on their iPhones. Applauded, I could not boast. I joined them and sat at a picnic table, drenched in cold rain, steam coming off my face, my forehead, and my very breath. The rain was in my sweat-wicking t-shirt, in my Lululemon running sweatpants, and my water-resistant running shoes were squishing out water like a wrung sponge as I walked to the bench and sat down in a heap, a puddle of waterlogged defeat. An old Jamaican man directly across from me had a gray glass eye beneath drapes of dreadlocks. He was playing chess with a young black boy, school age, wearing a ball cap. There was a midget. He was a handsome fellow, square and black-haired with a side part, wearing a collared shirt and khakis, carrying himself with the deportment of a king. He was clean-faced, with a small mustache, giving just a hint of the rebel. I saw a red-haired woman in a green dress walking past. I saw a crow fly through the archway, down toward Pebble Beach. It was a surreal moment, separated out of time, and then, as I sat calmly, looking about, I heard a sound. It was a chirping whistle, a piping, a chattering screech. Chwee-a-pep-a, chwee, chwee. The sound came again, haunting, melodious, distressed. Chui e pepe chui, chui, oop, chui. Then on the heels of the sound was a mocking chortle. Orb, qua, orb, 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 qua. I looked about. I looked at the red-haired woman in the green dress who had sat down and was talking to a 7-foot-tall monster, a giant, who looked like an adult sitting at the tea table outside on the back lawn of a doll's house. They went on chit-chatting without a hint of disturbance. I looked at the Jamaican man with the dreadlocks and the glass eye. He moved his rook nonchalantly across the left-hand side of the board saw, capturing a threatening bishop with a satisfied smile. I could not see the little boy's reaction, but he was a gaunt boy, malnourished, with a Yankees ball cap. I looked at the midget, who was reading a book in the light of the golden hour, facing outward on the park bench he chose, oblivious to his surroundings. Did none of them hear it? Chui e pepe chui chui. Then I looked up and identified the sound. The thing that made it. It was perched, inverted, clinging with claws like meat hooks that dug deeply into the concrete of the archway, holding the sinuous body in defiance of gravity. Its coat was a brilliant golden color that shimmered like fall leaves coated in nail polish and adorned with 1,000 tiny shimmering gemstones. It glistened with a slight pink hue. Its tail was a lion's tail, through and through, a happy, wagging tail that was at least 2 feet in length, with a big pom-pom on its end. It had a spiraling circular mane from neck to shoulder blade that transitioned from white feather to golden fur, capturing all the colors of the palette in between. And its wings. They hewed closely to the torso, the muscular lion's torso, draping the sides, a gold leaf texture, reminiscent of the hammered, thin, unmistakable coating on bar ceilings from a bygone age that features the iconography of the architect's fancy in repeating patterns and frames the rooms in an unnatural glow. And the head. The head was the most haunting. An eagle's head. That regal head. The beak with flaring nostril holes, alternating in the light between bright canary yellow and deep amber. A thing of menace. And the eyes, big and raven-like, but sad. A killer's stare. Eyes that encompass the eddies of shame mixed in with the confident assurance of death itself. The black swirl of destiny that has come to pass. Chui e pepe, chui chui. The thing sprinted along the archway to the ground like a circus motorcycle in a cage, seemingly immune to gravitational pull. Its footfalls light and quick. Impossibly light and quick. And it was off toward Pebble Beach. I sprang to my feet and ran after it, running at a high tempo, not knowing why I was giving chase. At first, I could see it ahead of me on Adams Street, heading north toward Water Street, and I picked up the pace. It ran along the sidewalk beneath some scaffolding, and then leaped upside down, running along the underside of the scaffolding like a weightless mirage. I sprinted hard, and lactic acid was pooling in my legs. We bore left on the cobblestones of Water Street, and the creature was back on the ground, pulling away from me, leaping with long, fast strides over the cobblestones. My legs grew heavy and leaden. Just past Jacques Torres' chocolate, it grew so small in the distance that it became like a lonely speck of gold. Finally, the creature reached Pebble Beach and the great glass cube over Jane's carousel, and leaped again over the velvet stanchion ropes at the entrance and perched atop the carousel frame. I finally reached the attraction and ducked inside, leaning against the glass walls of the display to catch my breath. I watched as the creature circled around the top of the carousel. The carousel started up, and strains of old-fashioned music from the band organ floated over the river, mingling with the sound of crowds passing by. Da, dun, dun, da, dun, da, da, da. The 48 hand-carved wooden horses began to rise and fall as they circled Brooklyn Bridge Park. Chui e pep e chui chui. The alien visage of this regal creature, with the head of a old eagle, vocalized its haunting call and then regarded me, head motionless, at full height over its tucked in and perched haunches, front legs straight, shoulders drawn back. It sat stationed on the far, ornamental exterior work beyond the moving mechanisms of the carousel, which spun beneath him. And it fixed its gaze and continued to regard me in eerie silence. Was this some apparition? A lengthy hallucination caused by my damaged neural veins? Or could this impossible vision be real? You dare to chase after me? It said, not in the voice of an ordinary man, but in a booming voice, like that of a great general. I thought it was a hallucination. I had to see if you were real, I said. This is no dream, boy. What stands before you has the strength of a lion and the wisdom of an eagle. I am the protector of great treasures. I test men's merits and search their hearts in hopes of finding, in any of you, the nobility and courage required. It said, well, I guess I'd best be going back home. I was just finishing up a run. I wasn't looking for treasures or claiming nobility or anything like that, I said, beginning to walk toward the door. Stop. Don't take another step. Are you telling me there's nothing your heart desires? The creature asked. Desires? Too numerous to mention. But right now, I just want my health back. A sliver of confidence, maybe, I said. Humph. That isn't much. What would you use this health for? What would you do with your courage? run in circles, aim for a promotion, settle down with a girl? Is there nothing more that drives you than a hamster wheel? Some money to throw at creature comforts, and settling down? No sense of adventure? It asked. Not for nothing, but making rent in Brooklyn and starting a family in this day and age is an adventure. Let me tell you, I said. Enough, insolent little man. You see these horses on this carousel? He asked. I see them, I said. Horses are the natural enemies of us griffins, the griffin said. Why? I asked. Because horses are mindless servants that serve the will of the pure and the wicked alike. Lemmings, good-natured creatures, almost aristocratic in their complete humility and subservience, but to no end. Us griffin are creatures of purpose, and you, my friend, are giving horse vibes, the griffin said. So, what is my purpose then? I asked. A better question would be, what is the purpose? But at least you are on the right track, the griffin said. Okay, so what is that? I asked. I must be on my way now, but I will see you again, the griffin said. And it turned, and in a flash, the griffin jumped over my head, landed outside of the display, by Pebble Beach, and with long, fluid strides, like a leopard, dove onto the river and began churning across the water. Legs turning so quickly, it looked like the spinning wheels of a locomotive. The powerful wings opened, and it took flight, flapping those giant golden, shimmering wings as it soared out of sight. I continued my run back home, churning my legs, a fire in my abdomen, heaviness in my legs, a drowsy, delayed hitch in my left leg's footfalls. And as I reached Williamsburg and was almost home, I suddenly collapsed. A light was shining in my eyes as I came to. A red-haired woman in green medical scrubs was flashing a light to test my pupils. Doctor, pupils constricting normally and dilating with the removal of the light, she said, looking down next to her. Monitor the patient for the next half hour, order up an EKG, and let me know of any unusual speech patterns observed, the man said. The doctor was a midget. He had a commanding presence, despite his small stature. As he walked out of the room, the nurse did a few more tests and then turned back to me and said, "Rest up. You'll need your strength." A few minutes later, a giant man with a huge forehead entered. He had to be 7 feet tall. He said, "I am here to put some heparin and warfarin into the IV drip. It'll just take a minute." The man placed the screw-on syringe into an input tube and pushed the drugs into my IV drip. Then he flashed a friendly smile and was off. Finally, a Jamaican man with dreadlocks and one gray glass eye walked into my room and started writing on the whiteboard on the wall in front of me. "Roger," he wrote on the board. "I'm Roge, like Rogie, and I'll be taking care of you these next few days. Just press down on that dar button if you be needin' anything, and I'll be right in to sort you out. Okay?" I nodded at the man as he left, and scanning the room, I saw a little black boy in the bed next to me. He was asleep, and his head was covered with a Yankees baseball cap. He lay there completely still, in a coma, or maybe sleeping, just as gaunt and frail as they come. I had taken my EKG tests, had been wheeled around for some scans, and then brought back to my room. Exhausted, I'd passed out for a bit. After coming to from a short nap, I heard it again. Chui chui. Looking before me in the room, I saw the griffin. It was seated in the corner by the open window, letting in the cool October air. "What's your why?" the griffin said. "What?" I asked. "You want to get better, right?" the griffin asked. "Of course," I said. "You're going to need something a lot heavier than a Starbucks cappuccino and a croissant to put up with what this life's gonna throw at you. You're gonna need a lot more treasure to make the adventure worthwhile," the griffin said. "I don't know what that is," I said. "There will be time, my boy, to find it," the griffin said. "But are you even real?" I asked. "I am real, if you believe," the griffin said. "But what is a purpose to live for? Give me an example," I asked. "That is up to you," the griffin said. And with that, jumped through the window, calling back, "It's all up to you." And as he took flight, I felt a searing pain in my left shoulder. Chui chui. Dream time. The barren charcoal seas of Mare Crisium span the horizon in all directions. The vast Picard crater is the only natural feature of this desolate landscape. Its high outer ridges cast a long shadow across the crash site as our white, hot star races towards sunset and lunar night approaches. "Harper, put your jumper on," says Mama's voice. "It's getting cold." The earth looms large in the sky, about 20 times more massive than it should be. I take small, slow steps towards it, transfixed. That shouldn't be there. It's too close. Our planet is spinning rapidly. Each day only lasts 3 seconds. With each rotation, this beautiful blue marble becomes ever more obscured by wildfire smoke, noxious gases, and nuclear fallout, until the permacloud forms and engulfs our home world, suffocating my view. I leap up high in desperation and reach with straining fingertips for the earth. Floating 10 feet above the lunar surface, a gravitational tug of war fights over me. The mighty planet wants me to come home, but the proximity of the moon wins this match, pulling me back gently to its dusty surface. Our stricken Orion X command module now lies before me, casting a great silhouette across the faint backdrop of our galaxy. This impressive machine towers over me, yet we are both still dwarfed by the endless nothingness of the lunar surface and the infinite space beyond. I hesitate at the entrance hatch door. A familiar tightness across my chest warns me to back away, Death is close. But a promise is a promise. So I force a quivering hand against the frozen palm port scanner. Nothing happens straight away. But sure enough, the warmth of my touch thaws the device until the emergency lighting illuminates the sensor pad and the outer hatch slides open. Taking a deep breath of nothing, I step in, shiver, and rub my arms as a ghostly chill runs through me. The inner airlock door is wide open to the main chamber. The lunar colony raiders who downed our ship have stripped it of all equipment. It's just a broken shell now, like me. This is usually the point when I awake, sweating and panicking. But this time is different somehow. This time, I'm ready to accept what has happened, to accept what I must do. Willing myself onwards, I creep around the other side of the central seating column. Burnsy's body is still strapped into his flight chair in full EVA suit, just as we were forced to leave him. The helmet visor is smashed, and I recoil at the sight of my dead friend's face. His one good remaining brown eye stares at me without seeing me. His features are perfectly preserved in the vacuum of space, with no oxygen or bacteria to do their worst. "All right, Harper," says Burnsy in his musical Welsh accent. "Took you long enough. Fancy taking this helmet off for me." Icy tears freeze upon my cheeks. "But I'll need to pull that shard out from your eye first. I'm bled out already. Just go for it." So I grip the metal fragment, once part of the ship's outer hull, with one hand and brace the other against Burnsy's forehead. There's a squelching sound as I ease it out from his eye socket. The gooey remains of his eyeball and some flesh and brain matter come out with it, making me retch. Burnsy doesn't move or make a sound until I have freed the 10-inch bloody dagger from his skull. I fling it away from us, exhale in relief, then twist off his cracked helmet. A pool of congealed blood oozes out with a sickly metallic stench. I throw up over my prison scrubs. "Ah, that's better. Cheers, mate," says Burnsy. "Hey, what's with the outfit?" "Solitary confinement. 1 year for sabotaging the mission." "Well, that's bollocks," he says. "It was your father, again. You weren't to know he was in league with those colonist bastards." I nod grimly, then clean my hands as best I can on my soiled uniform. Then, with great care, I remove both of his gloves and hold his freezing hands in mine. "I'm so sorry, Burnsy. I gave him the launch codes. It's all my fault." He reaches out to touch my cheek. "No, it's not. Your father tricked and betrayed you. Betrayed all of us. Come on now. No use crying. His love and compassion are more than I deserve. Tears are easy to wipe away. Guilt is not." I collapse into his strong, welcome arms I've missed you so much. I'll never forgive myself. Harper, this is not on you. Honestly, let it go. His undead hands gently prise me away, then undo his harness buckle. Taking my hands again, the body of Morgan Burns stands up. Now let me go. It's time. I'm ready. I shake my head. I'm not. He holds out an old-fashioned, wooden-handled spade towards me. We promised each other, remember? It's time. Taking the spade in one hand, I turn to face the exit hatch. Come on then. We step out onto the moon's black surface. My whole body convulses, and teeth start chattering. So I put on the old green woolly jumper and sheepskin boots that Mama keeps by the veranda. Then Burnsy and I head out for a nighttime stroll under the stars. Hand in hand, we walk across the dusty front yard, past the crooked gum tree and battered old tire swing I once loved so much. We continue past the empty, rusty cattle pens and into the outback. The sweet honey aroma of golden wattle trees fills the night air. This is just how I remember it. Before the great firestorm rose everything to ashes. With the darkness of a new moon above, the magnificent celestial arc of the Milky Way rises above the domed silhouettes of the distant Kata Chuta peaks. Is this where you grew up? Asks Burnsy. Partly. This was Grandpa's station and the ancestral homeland of Nana Kira. We rest under the canopy of a pale river red gum tree, where Nana used to tell my cousins and me Dreamtime stories. Here, by this creek? Perfect, says Burnsy. We were happy, weren't we? In Australia, his face is healed. Younger. Like from our R&D lab days back in Perth. His long, dark, matted hair is back, as are the memories of those raucous times. My cautious smile turns into a big grin. Those were the best days. Remember the nights out we had with Eddie, Kathy, and the gang? They were proper banging, eh? He says. How about them drinking games we played? Like Moose and One Lifeboat. What? All the games that you instigated? Not to mention those rude rugby chants you had us singing through the streets after closing time. We laugh until we cry. Then we just cry, mourning our long-lost friends, our families, and the lives we once had. Taking him by the hand, I broach the unspoken subject between us. Burnsy, I'm sorry I never fully loved you, like you loved me. His longing eyes are too much to bear, so I look down and make marks in the dirt with a stick. I just wish I felt those sorts of feelings. I wish I felt them for you. He leans over and kisses me gently on the cheek. I turn my head so our noses touch and our eyes meet once more. My hands are on his muscular chest. He's not bodybuilder big, but lean, like a man who's spent years building machines with his hands. and with me. He takes me in his arms once more. An alien sensation, an urge comes over me. So I kiss him back on the lips, fuller, deeper. A light breeze rustles the eucalyptus leaves overhead, and their minty, woody scent rains down upon us. Starlight dances upon the unhurried ebbs and flows of the burbling creek. A distant pair of boobook owls call to each other with mournful hoots, as if for the last time. Afterwards, we hold each other, gazing up at the night sky through the gaps in the canopy. We lay like this for a long while, putting off the inevitable, until Burnsy passes me the spade again. I'm ready now, so I get up and start digging. Aren't you going to help? I'm dead, remember? Always an excuse. The ground is dry and hard, so Grandpa Handley helps instead. After a long while, just before the outback dawn breaks, Burnsy's shallow grave is ready. Climb in then, I say. But Burnsy doesn't reply. His lifeless body, short-haired, blood-stained, and missing one eye, is already laid to rest. Scooping up the tear-spotted red earth, I find enough peace to bury my best friend and say goodbye, just as I promised.